All right. Glitch number one. We'll see how the rest of the episode goes. All right. So Daishy Miller here from Warrior Concepts. Welcome to this week's episode of KUDEN Radio. I know it's a podcast, but I wanted to call it KUDEN Radio. Anyway, and since we're 269 episodes in, I guess it's stuck. Right. So I've got James in the wings as usual. So with this episode, we are going to continue on from the apparent physical side of things, because everybody wants techniques, everybody wants to be the kick-ass warrior or the warrior who kicks ass. Either way, right? I think maybe a little bit of both. So I wanted to revisit something that I've been mentioning off and on. I did a lot last episode on one of the frameworks that we use at the Academy that was actually developed when I was a part of the Marishikai Instructors Guild that Sensei Hayes had put together many, many, many years ago, a couple of decades, that we affectionately call the 5Ds. And it was trimmed down. It was that way when I made my departure. But it's a strategic framework for helping students make sense out of an attack, right? Out of a fight. Because we find that a situation goes through these different phases, right? Or people that are experts or masters move through these phases, as long as they're not just like, I don't know, throwing Jello at the wall and hoping that something sticks. And so I'm not saying that they all use the framework. What I'm saying is they all do this thing. And so they might use different terms for it. They might use different terminology, right? Everybody has their own thing, right? So I want to go through that. But what I want to do is I want to make sure that we really get it, right? That this is not just something that was made up. I need to make sure that everybody understands this is not a step-by-step thing. These are not steps, right? Kind of like the way people see kata, right? That it can be overlaid over any martial art. So this is not owned by Nijutsu, the Bujinkan, whatever, okay? As a matter of fact, I have a book up on Amazon. It's in Kindle form or format. Advanced Self-Defense Combat Tactics, I think, is what it's called. And one of the longest, best reviews that was given was from somebody outside the art, who, while a bunch of people were complaining because, well, it didn't have any techniques in it, and what's all this, he saw it for what it is, and it's pretty much what he said, right? It can be overlaid over anything, and so everybody can have their favorite style and whatnot, but strategies, tactics, principles, concepts, those kind of things, those are universal. Okay, so I want to take a look at this, but what I'm going to do during this episode is I'm going to take a look at not splitting it so much, but I am. I'm going to go through it 3 times. Okay. And so 2 of those will be based on 2 extremes as far as fight or attack situations go. And then the other one, probably not going to look like what most people think of when they think of martial arts. Okay. Because it's going to be about everyday life. So the point here is that we can either collect techniques and then try to remember all of these things, or throw them all away and not remember anything, and then just wing it. Or we can get down to what the path is about, which is becoming a strategist, becoming a tactician, and understanding how to control chaos, how to control conflict. Right. So dive into that. And also during this episode, I want to take a look at some very common beliefs or doubts that some people have. And they're based on some shit that flies around on the internet and whatnot. So I do want to take a look at that, so that again, this is not just a mutual admiration society, blind belief, whatever. Okay. So anyway, we'll talk about more of that when we get back. So let me just go ahead and fire things up, and I'll see you on the other side.
So, the big question is this: how are self-defense and success-minded people like us, concerned citizens worried about protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and the things we care about from the monsters we know exist in the world? How do we train in a way that gives us the skills, knowledge, and understanding we need without becoming paranoid fighters or killers ourselves, and yet still allows us to be the hero protector the world needs us to be? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Jeffrey Miller, and welcome to KUDEN Radio. Real training for real people in a real world.
All right, I am back, and we are going to get started. I've got James in the wings. Before I get started, I'm like super excited. I had 2 more books come in that I almost forgot that I ordered. It wasn't because they took a long time to get in, but I have so much going on with like getting the dojo set up and all those kind of things. We have classes going. I'm about to start promoting things at the new for the new location and whatnot, but just so much to do because we've been around for a long time, but just in the old location where the fire took place for 11 years, a little over 11 years, which means that there's a lot of business directories out on the internet. There's a lot of martial arts school directories. There's a lot of articles and content and whatnot that I have produced in that amount of time that has the old address and those kind of things. We finally got the phone situation taken care of. But anyway, so lots of stuff going on. So like I said, I almost forgot. So I'll probably do a review somewhere along the way of these things, but I'm real jazzed about jumping into these. Both of them have been edited. They're actually from historical scrolls. And so they were both edited by Eric Shahan. If you've had any translations by him, they're really, really good. But this one, The Shadow School of Sword by Isu Ikusai. The school, supposedly from what I've gleaned so far with just a quick once over, was one of the 3 great schools of sword fighting. Okay. Along with the Shinto school and Nen school. So again, this is like straight out of like scrolls and whatnot. So really jazzed about jumping into that and seeing what I can add to the old bread basket, I guess, or brain bucket. Right? And then the other one here, the 100 Rules of War, originally by Tsukahara Bokuden. This is just little things, right? Like they're just little one-off kind of things, and then he does a little bit of commentary. But this one that I just kind of turned to here is you should know that a person wearing a newly forged tachi will invariably blunder, even if that sword cuts well. Okay. It actually says that a sword that's not at least 100 years old is one that you cannot rely on. Like young people full of vigor and energy, the vitality of a young sword is not entirely stable. Therefore, you cannot rely on it. Okay. Interesting. 100 years old, huh? Okay. So, like I said, can't wait to jump into that. I'm doing another pass through on Banzai Chukai, Shoninki, all those kind of things. So, just extra stuff for me to get into, plus all the articles that I'm writing, and I'm in the middle of writing 2 books, and so anyway, a little bit busy. So anyway, well, let's do what we always do to kind of fire things up. So I see folks are still signing in and whatnot. So James, if you're still over there on your end, I guess I could bring up my little switch. It shows me that he's over there. Who's on? Who said hi? Who already threw a question? Oh, before you tell me, a shout out to Carl, because over the weekend I set all this stuff up. I actually got ahead of things. Got the emails set out, got all the artwork done and all that kind of stuff, set up things, and somewhere along the line, like Restream dropped the ball. Not only did it not post to the different platforms, but the thing that I set up on Restream wasn't there when I saw Carl's email come in. Like there was no YouTube link, whatever. So I signed on, and I'm like, holy crap, because I could always just hit a button and send the things back out again, and it was gone. So really, really strange, right? My teachers used to write it off to those damn Koga Ninja, right? Out there in the cyberverse. Anyway, so who's on?
So far, the only ones checked in is Trinity from work.
All right. Well, if you're one of my group of regulars, sign in. Other folks, whichever platform you're on, because we're simulcasting to 2 Facebook pages, KUDEN and my personal one, YouTube, and it should be over on X as well.
Right.
With that?
Yes.
Yeah. So whichever platform you're watching through, you can always just, say hi in the comments and whatnot. And magically, through the power of the internet and technology, I don't freaking understand, it pops up on this little thing that James can see, usually, right? Usually. And he manages all that stuff on that side. So if you're saying hi to me, he's going to have to be your voice, because we played that game before, and we have some strange ones that sign in sometimes and try to usurp things. We have ones that probably should be mentally diagnosed if they haven't already been, and we have other ones that I wouldn't let near my friends, family, students, whatever, unless suspend the laws for a couple hours and whatever. You remember some of those, James, right? Cool. Propaganda things and
Oh
yeah. see his lips purse like that. Have you ever seen somebody do that? Right, that kind of thing, right? And check yourself. Catch yourself doing these things. That is it's a facial. It's people would think that it's a micro. See, and there we go. I'm going to hang up on that. I need to turn an app off on my phone because I said the phone was fixed over through the dojo, and the phone units are on back order. And so what just happened was a spam call to the dojo number, which is now reactive, just rang through to my phone, which is on silent. I forgot that the app is on my laptop as well, so I can take calls and whatnot. So anyway, where was I? What the hell was I saying before that rang?
You're talking about when somebody does the pursed lips thing.
Oh yeah. So there's some other things that kind of go on too, because you could just go and it doesn't fire certain things, muscles around your eyes and things like that. So there are muscle combinations in your face that you don't have conscious control over, and when they fire simultaneously, right, there's certain things that they convey. And so that pursed lip, the eyebrows go up just a little bit, the eyes widen a bit. Sometimes they squint, but usually not. There's a squinting at the corner, but they raise, right? It is the universal sign of I want to say something but won't. It's just like I'm going to staple my own lips together and we'll call it a day, right? I highly recommend that folks learn these things. It's actually, and this is not just my trip. Well, I guess it is my trip, but it's part of Ninjutsu. This is part of the Ninja no Uge, manipulation, deception, those kind of things, but also part of the Ninja no Kyomon, subject to study. And within the Togakure school, it's part of the Jupo Tento. Yeah, Jupo Tento. So these, it's where the the Gogyo is, the Uda Gogyo, and then these other 10 elements and whatnot. Under the Uda Gogyo, there is a section on humankind and studying different age groups, studying different people in different occupations and whatnot, but being able to read people. And also, it then bleeds into Henso Jutsu, disguise and impersonation, so that you can actually, well, do your best at mirroring things. Okay. But cool thing is there's lots of like modern science that I believe that if our ninja ancestors had Paul Eichmann and folks like that around that did the study on facial microexpressions and whatnot, they would have definitely just jumped on that and added it to their study. Okay. I teach that in my corporate workplace violence training, as well as to my students, because there are certain expressions, things, facial kind of things, eye movement, muscle contraction, those kind of things, face, body, and whatnot, that signal when somebody's going to go soon, as in like physically, violently jump. And so, if you know, I don't know, 5, 6, like I said, half a dozen of those, give you a huge heads up before they go, right? And less things are a surprise, or less and less things surprise you. But that doesn't mean you can't be surprised, which is why we have that phrase banpen fukyo, right? Which actually, by the way, comes from Mikyo. It roughly translates to no surprises, but it doesn't mean that you're not surprised. What it means is, well, one, you understand that we can be surprised based on alignment of awareness and attention span, those kind of things. But it's not being overwhelmed or thrown off your game from being surprised. You're surprised, and you can reestablish your equilibrium very, very quickly, right? So, is that it? Still just Trinity? Nobody else waxed and waned? And
Carl's here.
Awesome.
Jeannie's here.
Cool. All right. So again, Carl, thanks for the heads up. I'm not sure if you got my thank you email or not, but I appreciate the heads up, because all that stuff was done. And then, I don't know, as my teachers used to say, those damn Koga ninja. So, all right, cool. Let me,
Richard
cool.
Demio and Jimmy just dropped his konbanwa.
Awesome. Konbanwa. Togi desu ka? King desu. Arigato. Okay. Anata wa so desu ne. Okay. No, maybe. All right. All right. Konnichiwa, sensei. That's not Jimmy. That's not Jimmy. Anyway. All right. Let me bring up my notes here. Bum, bum, bum. Okay. So I've got a couple of things on the slate for this episode. The meat of it will be to take a look at our 5 phases of self-defense strategy and action framework that we have, that allows a student to basically make sense out of the chaos. Okay. And to always know where they are within the context of an attack or a fight, regardless of what's going on. Okay. Now, again, these are phases. They're not steps. And this is not something that I made up. I've went into it and studied it much more deeply, and have expanded on it. But this was something that was originally developed when I was in the Hayes camp, and I was a member of the Marishi Kai Instructors Guild. We had this big group that worked on, we traded teaching notes and ideas about what was working and what wasn't working, to help students learn this stuff as quickly as possible, but correctly, those kind of things between drills and whatever. Okay. We're the ones that decided that we were having a huge drop off after 5th Q. And so during that period, we only had 3 belt colors within Western Ninjutsu. We had white belts for brand new beginners. We had a green belt for the 9Q levels, right? And then we had black for people in the advanced level from Shodan up. And so we're the ones that developed the idea of from 5th Q to 1st Q, people would be in a brown belt because, well, it's just understood across most martial arts that color is kind of pre-black belt and whatnot. But it broke things up enough because I know there's a lot of instructors out there that have this idea that, if students don't stick it out, it's because they're not motivated. It's because they're not committed enough. It's lots of excuses that people can give or reasons that they can give. I know that they're reasons, right? But being a teacher requires a whole lot more skill sets than just knowing the techniques that are being taught or regurgitating the lessons that the teacher said, sensei said. There's properly promoting the group so that you attract the right kind of people. There's retention, things like that, right? And it doesn't matter if you're getting paid for class or not. Okay? In our instructor training program that we have, speaking of which, Carl went through that, and James, you went through it, I think, twice. Several folks have gone through it. Well, a bunch of people over time have gone through it. Everyone who's going to be a certified instructor in my academy has to go through at least that first iteration. And there's more that I could do, but one of the first lessons that an instructor candidate goes through, whether they're going through the live version at the academy or they're going through the recorded version that we have online, is in every class, a student is either one step closer to their black belt or their next level of black belt, or one step closer to the door. And how you teach that class, in part, determines that. It's not all, right? I'm not going to write off that there are bad students or whatever, okay? This week it's martial arts and next week it's underwater basket weaving or tie-dyeing fish, whatever. But before we go writing it off to, people not being committed or nobody's interested or it's summertime and that's why everybody takes off or whatever, the instructor needs to maybe look and see what skill sets they're missing. But anyway, right? So there's this thing, right? So anyway, so I want to do that with the 5 phases to look at things from the strategic side. And then once you have it, you should be able to look at a kata and see the phases that the kata takes you through. Okay. Yeah, but sensei, there's 5 phases, but like that kata only has like 3 moves. Okay. Is there anything that comes before the punch is actually thrown, or the sword comes, or the guy puts his hands on you, or whatever? Could there be something that comes after it? Right? We've had sessions on Zanshin, right? This lingering awareness before, during, and after an engagement. The answer is yes. Okay. And I also address how students can be confused because in the early stages, we give them these models that they can see, right? These 5 phases, but we want to make sure that they're not confusing them with steps. But the confusion comes where the student is like, well, like black belts are doing like 1 or 2 moves and it's over. Like, but you said 5 phases. Yeah. Okay. Those phases can happen they can overlap. They can happen at the same time. You're going through phases, but a move could cover 2, 3 of those phases because of the way you did it. Okay. I have a couple of quotes from some of the Soke, Hatsumi Sensei, Takuma Sensei, and even Nagato, those kind of guys that reference these. But I also, and this is probably where I'm going to start, I want to address this, not this. There's a couple of beliefs and bullshit comments that fly around the internet and on and off the internet from people who don't believe this stuff either works for self-defense, will work for modern self-defense, right, for one or more reasons, and or there's just a lot of this art that's just not applicable in today's modern world. Okay. And I really want to address those things without turning that into the whole episode, because the meat is going to be the 5 phases, because I really want to make sure that you understand it, and you understand that this is what will be left over. This is what you have to know. You have to be able to feel it. You have to intuitively be able to use this in a situation where you will literally have to make up the techniques on the fly, under fire, right? After you have done what Hatsumi Sensei told advanced people to do, throw your techniques away, right? We all know that you're not going to do a kata in a fight, right? I mean, if a kata pops out, that'd be cool, right? But we're not learning the kata to use the kata. We're learning the kata to learn the lessons that are carried within the kata. The kata are models and examples of the principles and concepts at work, right? In Mikyo, there's this really confusing lesson that students really have to get their head wrapped around, and that is that void is form and form is void, or form is emptiness and emptiness is form. And it really dives into this big thing, and it's really confusing to folks. But what it's pointing to is that there's more going on than meets the eye, so to speak, right? And so just like this chair that I'm sitting on, right, it's made from different types of material. There's like a padded seat, and then there's plastic here on the arms, but there's a metal frame, those kind of things, right? But ultimately, all of those things, right, these parts have been molded and put together to create a chair, right? Well, it's a chair. Everybody knows it's a chair. But see, from a different perspective, it's a bunch of molecules, right, that have a certain molecular structure, certain atoms and all that kind of stuff, right, that make each of these types of materials that are then put together. So kata are the chairs, okay, the subatomic structure that allow that thing to be what it is that we can perceive with our sense organs. That's the principles and concepts. Okay, the emptiness that they're talking about, this void, is the invisible stuff. Principles and concepts, you can't see them without a physical example. Okay, but the physical example, see, ego wants to grab that and lock it down. Okay, we give things cool kata names or form names, and we are, super proud when we can do them and execute them, crisply and flawlessly and things like that. And so much so that some systems, that's a huge part, right? It's not just a part of the learning curve. I mean, you think about the way the traditional Japanese martial arts work, right? With this shuhari model, okay? You start by learning the mechanics. You start by learning these forms, and you're not allowed to do henka. You're not allowed to do variation. At the shu stage, SHU, this particular kanji, means to copy and preserve. Okay, so we're preserving kata that have been passed down because they were passed down by people who lived and died by this stuff, and this was the form they made up for you to understand certain things a certain way. Okay, it wasn't some guy in his basement still living with his mom at 30 eating cheese balls who decided he was going to make up his own martial art. Okay, now we may chuckle at that. Some of us are chuckling because, well, that was funny, Sensei, and others are chuckling because we know people who've done that shit. Okay, but again, we have to learn the model so that then we can spend time with it and extrapolate the lessons and things like that, right? And then we move on to the ha part of it, right? Ha, I'm not laughing, and it's not like horse and horsemanship and things like this. This means to break, right? So this is where Henka goes. This is where all kinds of things go to find out when a technique is actually applicable, when it's the worst idea that you could ever freaking come up with, under what conditions, those kind of things, right? You break it apart into its constituent parts. This is where you're learning the principles and concepts and things like that, right? And then you've got this D or I, this D stage, which means to transcend, to go beyond, right? And at that stage, this is where the way this was explained to me when I was coming up through the ranks, and this was when the Bujinkan only had 5 dans. At 5th dan, there were very specific things that you were allowed to do, and you know whatever, right? But it was expected that you would be a walking, talking example of the principles and concepts of the art, not just that you had memorized all this stuff and can duplicate kata. Okay, so again, there's this transition, right? But there's a whole other system that some styles use or some schools use, and in that system, kata are sacrosanct, right? They're sacred. You don't fuck with them. You're not allowed to do. You don't break them. You don't change them. You don't whatever, right? Because this is part of that school or style's identity. Okay, and so in those kind of schools. What you'll often see, even in the same class, right? You'll see a forms portion of class. And so things look a certain way, right? Sometimes solo, sometimes group or whatever, but you got the forms part of class. And then you have the sparring part of class, which usually doesn't look like the forms part of class. And then you have the goshin or the self-defense part of class, which often doesn't look like either of the other two, okay? Because, right, they're still needed, but it doesn't follow the classical traditional shuhari model. Not that they don't have things that way, or that they're trying to reconcile things that way. It's not as predominant, or it's not the primary structure. Okay, so anyway, but this stage to transcend, right, means that you can let everything else go because it's only going to impede further development, and you know the principles and concepts, the strategies, the tactics, those kind of things so well that you don't have to think about it. No matter what the situation is, you assess and you know exactly which ones to use. And you're literally going to make up the technique or the answer, the solution to the problem on the fly, right? And it's going to be correct, okay? But maybe not official if you know the difference, right? So I want to go into that. And so it's kind of a double-bladed kind of thing. So let's do that. James, anybody else sign in or say hi before I jump into this full on?
Just Maury and Dave.
Okay,
Cool.
All right, welcome on. Okay, so a lot of you guys have been around for a while, so if I'm speaking to you and you're like in one of the podcast directories, or you're new to this, or you just kind of jumped on and I don't know, episode 269 looked cool, so here we are, right? You're not a long-time listener, first-time caller, right? You're zero, right? So anyway, there has been a long ongoing debate about ninpo, ninjutsu, about these things being outdated in the context of modern self-defense. And I know for a lot of us, right? Well, some of us, if you're anything like me, you got started in martial arts looking for, the the martial side of things and whatnot, self-defense, and then happened upon ninjutsu. Okay. But here we are, right? But for the most part, everybody's here because you believe that this will work, right? But you might be in a group of folks that hope it works. You believe that it works. You want to believe that it works, but because of things that either you have seen or the way you've seen things in classes or in videos online, or based on what other fighters or other martial artists are saying, there might be some, I don't know, little doubts in the back of your mind, or some very obvious doubts, right? So, and that might be there, and sometimes that ends up being seen because or through people cross training in other arts. Okay? Well, that's not covered in this art, or I'm not sure that's going to work, so I want to get this thing over here, or I want to learn as much as possible, or whatever. And there's upsides and downsides to that as well. But that aside, okay, that aside, one of the big things is, again, it's outdated for modern self-defense, right? People don't fight like that anymore, that kind of thing, right? They will argue that the bladed nature, right, of a lot of Nippo Taijutsu, like the kamae, and even the way we apply things and move in and out of a counter and whatnot, right, it's irrelevant in today's street fights, right? Just others will flat out claim that it doesn't work in the real world, or it's not real, it's a bunch of BS, whatever. We've all heard this stuff, right? So I'm gonna take a minute and discuss how this misunderstanding stems from a narrow or flat out missing focus on techniques rather than principles, or not being able to reconcile an apparent visual mismatch, right? People fight nose to nose, toe to toe, but you guys are doing this kind of thing, and what the hell's up with that? And then there's this other side to this argument as well, with, there's so much that's in classical ninjutsu that's just not right applicable in today's world, and those kind of things, right? And people will cite stuff like the spying and the classical weapons and things like that, right? And again, maybe I lucked out and got on board when I did, and Hatsumi Sensei and Hayes and a bunch of these early instructors were framing things much more from the perspective of principles and concepts. It wasn't. I got started in this art in late '80, early '81. Some of you guys weren't even born yet, and we weren't even made aware that there were kata. As a matter of fact, we were flat out told there were no kata. We weren't made aware that there were kata in this art until at least 1986, if not a little bit later, right? And then there were all these kata lists being passed around, and everybody turned into kata collectors instead of focusing on principles and concepts. And then, the rest is history. Everything just started to change and crystallize and become the style that Ninjutsu's not, right? But either way, so again, I want to touch on these because this is really, really important, okay? And not because I believe that ninjutsu, Nippo Taijutsu, all this stuff is applicable. I'm coming at it because I've applied it. So it's applicable because I've applied it, okay? And a lot of these techniques that I'm teaching have been field tested. Right? The number of times I've whipped a mushadori on somebody in the face of people online commenting under a technique video where I'm demonstrating mushadori, who say that it's BS and that would never work in a real fight. I don't know what to tell you, right? I mean, I wish I were, I don't know, the Terminator, where I could like have this thing that I could pop the memory card out and so people could watch the events take place or whatever. It's just, but again, here's something that we need to understand, and that is you will start off with belief until you know for sure. Okay. And that's one of the things that I definitely want to talk about, because there's got to be more than just the kata training to allow you to get bits and pieces of this experience, or you end up in a situation like, I don't know, some of my guys have been in that are in law enforcement and security and whatnot, that or they're special operators and whatnot that send me thank you emails, or that they know, right? And they know that things work out the way we're putting it out, right? That you can actually foresee how an attack or a fight is going to progress and already be ahead of it, right? But anyway, so first things first, right? The bladed nature of things, and I've mentioned this in previous episodes, but if you're new, I want to get this out of the way. I'm going to keep it fairly short because for some folks, this is going to be a review. For you, just, stay with us. I just need to make sure everybody's on the same sheet of music. Okay. There's a saying that to be ignorant of history, right, makes one prone to repeat it. I don't know if there's a common quote that mirrors that, but there should be. And that is, to be ignorant of history makes one ignorant, because you'll have to reinvent the wheel along the way, right? Or you'll be guessing your way through things. Okay? And what I mean by that in this reference to, like, we fight one way, but that's not how people fight anyway. I get it. Okay. But this only takes a little bit of research into the history of combat during different eras, because people do one of two things. They only look at modern stuff, and then they look at anything that's traditional or ancient. Remember that one little comment I pulled out of the 100 Rules of War book, right? That if a sword hasn't lasted for 100 years, it can't be relied on. Well, shit. Okay. That goes for martial arts that are not so old as well. Okay. And it's not that they can't be made to work by individual practitioners, but that's more about the practitioner than the art. Okay. Because anybody can make anything work. They just need to have the right things, even if that's luck in that moment. Right. But the history of combat, I'm just sticking on the Japanese side because we don't have time for a bunch of other places. Okay. So during the Sengoku Jidai Warring States period, where a lot of this stuff was developed, okay, way back, Japanese history, okay, and of course that came out of the Kamakura era and preceding ones, okay, almost universally, people fought from this bladed posture, okay, and then what we see going into the Edo period, a little bit in the early Edo, but middle by the end, late middle and into the late Edo period, because all eras, all the periods in Japanese history are subdivided into early, middle, and late. So you can't even just go like the traditionalists, right? Well, I only want to do it the traditional way. What the fuck does that mean? What era are we talking about? Okay. I'm living to the samurai or the samurai code, and which era? Because that meant something different in completely different periods of Japanese history. Okay? So, but by late Edo, things were already changing. And then what you can watch over the course of Japanese history is things going from like belated, right? Well, we're used to seeing in Bujinkan training, the 9 schools, all this stuff, right? Is things just systematically over time just start to shift until even in today's world, Japanese fighters are doing Western style fighting. Right? European shifted. Right? What the hell? Well, if we don't just do what a lot of people do, right? Like X turned into Y, so that automatically means that, okay, like, okay. If we just look at one other element, okay, because during different periods in Japanese history, armor was built differently. Why was armor built differently? Because of the weaponry. Same in today's world, right? Weapon systems are designed to penetrate the armor of the day. So what do? They upgrade the armor to make it more difficult for the weapon system to penetrate. So what do they do next? They change the armor to deal with that. And then they change the weapon system. Same shit happens today, right? So that's a parallel, but it all goes to weapons. Because what we can see coming out of the feudal period, and like it accelerated exponentially from early 1800s, 1850-ish, right? The beginning of the Meiji Restoration, right? Forward, like it accelerated at a huge pace because over time, weapons became less favored or flat out illegal. And so if you don't have weapons, that if you make a mistake and turn your life-sustaining systems toward this individual, and you're not going to be punished the same way, and it takes more to drop you, well, then you start doing certain things that you wouldn't have done with weapons. Okay. Now, is that my argument for justifying our bladed stuff over the way the average fighter, conventional fighter in today's world fights? No, not entirely. Okay. My justification is it's much easier for a fighter or a warrior who is trained to deal with weapons or at any moment a weapon coming into play to go from fisticuffs, just a fist fight, to dealing with weapons than it is for somebody whose training is all about fists and feet and grappling and whatnot, and no consideration for weapons coming into play. It's way easier for one to adapt to an escalation than it is for the other one. Does that mean they can't? No, I just said it's way easier. Okay. Because if I'm profiled, I'm already minimizing targets. It's already harder for that person to get at me, which is probably why he grabbed a damn weapon to begin with. But if all I know is this, and I can't fight from here because wherever my chest is where my eyes and my weapons point, I'm going to have a hard time. And we can see this. We can see this play out in the real world, right? My cop students and peers and security people and whatnot, you know this. You see it, right? Or you've seen it. The tough guy who's all about just beating the shit out of somebody or will step up and get in any fight. The other guy suddenly like draws a gun, pulls a knife or whatever, or grabs a club or whatever. This tough guy automatically, not in all instances, Some give it a good college try or not, right? But they'll go, whoa, hey, whoa, no, and they'll fold faster than a bad piece of Japanese origami, right? Or you see the tough guys in their younger years willing to step up, do all kinds of stuff. And then as they're getting older and they recognize they're getting, I mean, maybe they haven't had a weapon pull on them. Maybe they have, whatever. They got cut up, those kind of things. But they were able to kind of, I don't know, survive. Either, they either beat the guy or they got to check out of the ER and not be signed out of the ER, if you understand the difference. Right. So as these guys get older and they realize they're slower or whatever, right? Next thing you know, they become the negotiators and all that kind of stuff, right? So my only point to this is one of two things are going on. Okay? Either, and they're both superficial, either the person is making a visual value judgment. Nobody fights this way. And that's odd. What they're really saying is, I don't understand it and understand how to use it. And so since it looks different, it's wrong. Okay. Or because a lot of these people that are saying it have been in the training. And just like I said earlier, it may not be the style, it may be the practitioner. Okay. And I'm not speaking ill of any instructors, but the reality is that students can only learn things the way the instructor understands it or wants to understand it. Okay. So if they didn't get it that way, because I've had lots of students challenge techniques and whatnot, and not in, asshole way or whatever, but just like, since I don't get this one. Okay. I had a student one time. This guy was a retired Air Force colonel in his 70s, still training, like built like a freaking rock. I mean, just whatever, right? And whenever we're doing like heavy-handed kind of like, the uke uch, right? The uke nagash, where you're pounding on the arm and not just receiving things. We put on the open finger gloves, right? Because it still hurts. You still feel the knuckles through it, but it diminishes things quite a bit. And so we're doing these techniques, or if we're doing it bare knuckle and whatnot, especially in the earlier stages, soft training, slow, that kind of thing. And one time, as a matter of fact, it was his first introduction to things. I invited him to our Shinobi Kai class, which is for those people who want to learn the entirety of the art and want to learn it the way I learned it, which means we didn't have gloves, we didn't have soft training, that kind of stuff, right? And as a part of that class, we did some uke uch drills. Okay. What I mean by that is the receiver of the technique. Okay. We didn't play defender attacker, right? So you had the deliverer of the technique and you had the receiver of the technique, which is what uke is, right? And so what they did was they threw a ski and then locked down as though they were at that point where they'd be making impact with the body, right? So there's that tension and they're holding that position, and their partner, the one doing uke, got on that one line, right? Isen, one line, right? And then rocked this thing down, shifted offline, and slammed into that arm with those knuckles, bang, with the goal to knock the uke off balance, right? And all I had to do was like take a little step or whatever. So we were putting bite in the strike. I know how close to rhyming that sounded. I didn't mean for it to come out that way. However, we're working on bite. So 3 shots, give it your oomph kind of thing, right? And then your partner trades. So basically we're sacrificing our, selves to the cause. And then every time we switched back, then your partner stuck out the other arm, just share the love between the arms. And so this is what we're working on. It also worked to help desensitize ourselves to getting struck, because first couple of times you go through training like this, you will bruise up like a right? But over time, the conditioning of the body is such that it adapts to its conditions, its regular conditions. And so it becomes harder and harder to get bruised. Not that you don't feel the technique, you don't get numb, nothing like that, but your body doesn't get damaged the same way. Okay. I know a lot of people don't want to do this. Sensei said soft training. Sensei says soft training to people who don't understand how to train correctly and are likely to hurt themselves or hurt others. And that comes out of experience in the early to mid 80s. Right. So, anyway, it wasn't until after this class was over that this student comes up to me and he says, I really have to apologize. I'm looking around like, what do you mean you have to apologize? Did you do something? Did you break something? Or no. Up to this point, I thought that technique, I mean, I did it because we're doing the style and everything, and I didn't want to be disrespectful. But I really didn't think it worked. Right. And I said, well, why do you have to apologize for that? He goes, well, I had all those thoughts, and I just, in my head, I was thinking in a real fight, I'm going to do this other stuff that I've always done because that's hokey, and I'm not doing that. But I'm apologizing because I was ignorant. I didn't know any better. I said, what do you mean? He goes, I now understand why that works. Okay. Because not only does it hurt, but it knocks somebody off balance, and there's flinch responses and all kinds of things that I had no clue of because we were wearing gloves. And I said, awesome. Okay. I'm not going to ask you what you think of them now because that's obvious. But what I want to know is, do you understand the difference between the conventional class for people that think it's a good idea to learn self-defense and would like to earn their black belt, and this program that I'm inviting you into? Okay. So anyway, so a lot of folks, they don't because they don't have the experience. Either the teacher didn't give it to them, or they quit before they got to that point because they just made a, value judgment or whatever. Okay. And then this crosses over to weapons as well. Okay. Because again, these are those things that like they don't apply anymore, right? I mean, nobody's spying and we're not sneaking into houses, and so we don't need stealth. And okay, one, spying is nothing but information gathering and collecting information that allows you to have more clarity and a bigger picture. Okay, not necessarily about an opponent. Could be about any problem or situation that you're in, goals that you're trying to attain or whatever. So So now what I think is that you have a problem with narrow vision, right? You can't understand how it applies, so you just assume that it doesn't. Okay. Same thing with stealth. Okay. What if we just flip stealth on its ear? And so we're not trying to sneak into some place that's not mine. What if somebody like came into my house or my space and they got weapon systems way bigger than mine, and I need to stealthily get my ass out of there or hide in a way or in places that they would never look? Stealth is stealth. The way we think about it makes it good or bad, makes it applicable or not. Same thing with the weapons. Okay. Well, nobody's using like naginata, nobody's using halberds, nobody's using swords, right? So none of that stuff matters, man. Nobody's using throwing stars. And as a matter of fact, in a lot of places, those things are illegal. Yeah, you're right. Okay. What about shovels? What about garden rakes? Right? What about a little saucer under a teacup, or drink coasters, or anything like that? Anybody still using those kind of things? Okay. Because what I was taught was that the traditional weapons are models for things that are similar. They could look completely different, but that's not where the similarity lies. Okay. Shovels and rakes are very close to naginata, bisento. What we have is a pole arm with more weight on one end than on the other, so it's not balanced the same way. Naginata, it's a blade, it's a sword blade out on the end of a pole, which means that if I'm going to cut with it, I have to maintain awareness of where that edge is. Otherwise, I'm going to be hitting the guy with the spine. Not a bad idea. Or I'm going to smack him with the side of it or whatever, but I'm not going to do a cut. Like shovels, whatever, right? Okay. push brooms, any of these things that are heavy on one end, and we have to move them the same way. Okay, well, what about swords? Okay, right. There's places in this world, and I don't know if you travel. If you don't travel, maybe it's not a big deal. But I mean, shit, people can buy machetes at freaking flea markets these days. They're shitty versions of them, and depending on where you live in the world, in some places they're just tools. Everybody has them. Okay, well, machete is just a straight bladed short sword. Okay, may not be as refined as we would like in our fantasy about being samurai, but it's a short sword. Okay. And so when we learn to use them, we also learn to defend against them. We learn their advantages, disadvantages, weaknesses, strengths, those kind of things. And so kind of feeds into things, right? And I can also kind of shift perspective, right? Because if I hold a knife and I have the perspective that this is a sword with a really short blade, short sword, long sword that I would hold single-handed or whatever. Now I don't just have knife techniques that I can draw from. I have sword techniques that I can draw from. They'll be modified based on size of weapon, but it's no different. Okay. If I have a hanbo or a cane or any short stick weapon, right? And I can see it in the same light as a sword, it just doesn't have an edge or a pointy part out front to penetrate, but I can wield this like a sword. I just now, doubled or tripled the techniques I have with the hanbo because I'm not limited. And this is the ninja's forte. I'm not limited by what it looks like or what most people think it is. I can use it. Right? Yeah, I can't cut somebody with a hanbo, but I can do a sword technique that would drop somebody with a cut, but I can wield it that way, whatever, right? And so now, one, I've doubled or tripled the number of techniques I have for other weapons that are more modern and conventional. I just added everyday items because I've learned how to move things that otherwise would be unwieldy or might even just blow past my attention, right? And I've created a situation where I'm going to confuse the shit out of him because he might start off laughing, but that'll change soon, right? If I hold this thing, right, this hanbo or cane or whatever, like it's a lightsaber or like it's a sword, right, and I use it that way, what are the chances that this attacker has ever seen somebody, even if he's been in, gang fights and whatnot, where chains and tire irons and all kinds of shit were involved, right? What are the chances that he's seen or had to deal with somebody wielding a cane like a sword effectively? Okay. This is a huge paradigm shift. So to the naysayers, I say, I'm going to borrow from my Southern friends. Bless your hearts. Right? Be careful, right? Ninjutsu has been designed from its inception to adapt to any geography, any region, any time, any situation. One of our core strengths is adaptability. But to do that, we need to get down to the principles and concepts and the strategies and tactics, not the form. We need to dive into the realm of the formless, the stuff that makes a kata what it is, or a technique what it is, that makes things look like what they do in a given context, right? We need to shift away from that. Okay. So anyway, that's my first part here for what we call this part one, I guess. Shift back over here to my other screen. Okay, James, any comments or questions or anything that popped up for folks while I was covering all that? You know that, James, you know that old phrase, those who say that it can't be done should get out of the way of the people that are already doing it. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. The number of times I've been told by people, by fighters, martial artists, or whatever, that, this or that technique doesn't work or would never work or whatever. Right. And that was actually something I actually used in real time. I lost count. So all I can do is smile and just kind of nod and go, oh, okay. Right. So, but thanks for informing me. Right. Well, one guy, I got him so inflamed, and I didn't mean to. I meant to shut him up, and it flipped, but it helped me with traffic online. Right. He said that something would work or whatever, or it was bullshit or something like that. And what I said was, my response was, I'm sorry that it didn't work for you the way you had expected. And what he came back with, what do you remember this comment, James? He came back with, I would never do any bullshit like that. Or, oh, okay. So we're going to knock something, but we don't, one, we've never done it. Two, we don't understand it. And three, we're just showing that, we think in a very limited way. So I don't have conversations. I don't have arguments with 6-year-olds who don't understand how the engine is, put together, who want to tell me how to fix it. I don't have conversations or arguments with people that are not equally educated on my side as I am on theirs. Well, that's just stupid. Okay? And that goes back to Musashi, right? It's not about when Musashi talked about knowing the enemy and yourself. It wasn't just on the inside. It was their fight techniques, their weapons, the way they employ those weapons, which is why I get things like the Shadow School of Sword and whatnot. If this was one of the top 3 schools of sword, and I'm studying, like from a ninja's perspective, how to defend against that stuff, why would I not want to know how these other sword schools wield a sword? Oh, and please notice that during that little rant that I had about the naysayers, right, I steered away from anybody in our camp who just believes in ninjutsu and just says everything else is bullshit and that doesn't work. Our stuff is better because it's better. Okay, so I don't have discussions or arguments or whatever with folks that are crippled or immature or ignorant in that knowledge base. Okay, this conversation's over. This argument is over. Okay, no matter how much they want to chase me down. Matter of fact, there's one nutbag that chases us down on a regular basis and floods our freaking email. He might be on now. I don't know. I knew that he changes his screen names and he changes his email addresses and all that. Yeah. And then it's obvious that it's him because he'll either forget and drop his name or he'll, I don't know, just do dumbass shit. But after I say something like this, where he knows I'm talking about him, right? Tomorrow we'll get like 300 messages within an hour and a half because he uses email like fucking texting. Right. And then because he can't help himself. Right. And so I don't engage back and forth because even though he thinks he's enlightened and he's a guru and all that kind of shit, it's obvious that he's not. Okay? And you don't have to have a freaking degree or be a ninja master to know. So anyway, James, get ready for all the emails that are going to come in tomorrow. Well, actually, probably starting now, and it'll just run overnight. And we know when he goes to sleep. We know when he grabs a bite to eat. We know when his battery dies, whatever, right? Because for everybody's edification, this guy averages 1 to 2 messages per minute, and it goes on for hours. But I'm the crazy guy, and I'm the one, So, and I'm sure that there'll be a death threat or 3 tossed in over the next couple hours. So, yeah. Anyway.
So Victor checked in, said good
Awesome.
evening, and then also said it's funny how the same individuals who knocked down the teaching and history of the nine Bujinkan Yuruha hold the Book of Nine Rings and the Art of War in such high regard.
Yeah, and if anybody's ever read the Book of Five Rings or the Art of War, especially, right? I mean, just if you've been in this art for, it doesn't even have to be a really long time, but if you've spent significant time in studying and understanding the principles and concepts from chapter 1, paragraph 1, all the way through, it's not just chapter 13 that's for ninja, right? I mean, just everything that just echoes things back, right? And the Book of Five Rings. One teacher once told me that the Book of Five Rings was shit, but you'd have to understand the history behind it because it was written at the end of Musashi's life. But Musashi makes a lot of presuppositions that you are a high-level practitioner because that book is highly summarized. I mean, it's not written for beginners. But you take it for what it's worth. I'm sure I just punched a couple of people's egos. But Victor, awesome. Always glad to hear from you, my friend. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to make it in for fall camp or Daikomyosai or whatever. Don't make me pack up the car and drive down there. need to do a seminar down there. I'm going to be in Syracuse, New York, September 20th, doing a single day thing up there. So I meant to have things done by the weekend. Didn't get it done because of all these other things going on. So here shortly, I will have it up. It's open to students through the school. Actually, the school's paying for them. But it's also open to outsiders and whatnot. It's going to be held at Lemoyne University, or Lemoyne College, I guess is what it's called, in Syracuse. And so I'll have the registration form on onlineninjaacademy.com for anybody that's in the area or going to be in the area or wants to be in the area. Yeah, so that'll be cool. All right, what else do we have?
Dave said MS-13 loves to use machetes.
Indeed. This whole naysaying thing goes way back. I remember going to a seminar with Stephen Hayes. He was in Germantown, Ohio, in this old tobacco barn. And I flew in from what was then West Germany and went to this seminar, and this topic came up. This was probably, I don't know, 83, 84, maybe. It might not have been that late. But so we're in the Dayton area, and the topic came up about swords and the whole naysayers, right? And how, nobody uses swords these days, blah, 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 whatever, right? And somebody brought up that coincidentally that week, a busload of tourists in South America had been attacked on the road by bandits and hacked to death by machete. So that kind of thing went out the window. Because I think a lot of people make their assumptions based on their geographical area, based on their experience or knowledge or whatever. And it takes folks who either dive in and study warfare, conflict, whatever, that spend their time binge watching YouTube or balancing out their technique training, binge watching kind of things with looking at CCTV footage. And James, you and I talk about that stuff all the time, where that kind of stuff is out there. There's even a couple of sites dedicated to just doing reviews and what do you call them? Commentary on those kind of things. But just looking at those things to understand how attacks happen And then there's folks that will take that kind of stuff back to the dojo and using the principles and concepts that we're learning, right? How would we or could we deal with that kind of situation? But people make snap judgments based on their limited perspective. And sometimes it truly is ignorance, as in they don't know any better. They don't know they're doing it, or they don't realize they're doing it. I'm not worried about them. Right? The ones that that kind of get my ire occasionally are the ones who choose ignorance. Right? That's never going to happen to me. Whatever. So, or that's there. That would never happen here. Yeah. When Columbine happened, the whole incident there, for anybody that's old enough to remember, a little while after that, I was invited to be on a panel of experts in my local region that was sponsored by the United Way, but it was hosted by like the news agencies in the area, because a lot of people were like, how could this happen? How could this happen? That kind of thing. And so it almost looks like I was like presiding over the panel, but because they positioned me in the middle and then two. So I don't know how that happened, but either way. And then the host it wasn't an MC, it wasn't a master of ceremonies. What the hell are they? He was a kind of like they have in the presidential debates, moderator maybe. He had the list of questions that came in from people and whatnot. And so there was me, and then there was a criminal psychologist from a local community. There was somebody from the prison system, specifically on the juvenile side of things, just, things like that. There was somebody from like a domestic abuse kind of thing, where she was obviously leading with her trauma and making it very personal, and then everything was shoved into that mold. My comments about if all you have is a hammer. Yeah. So everybody was a nail. But at the end, during the Q&A, people had, a bunch of people had the same kind of question, like, how could this have happened? How could this? And they let each of the panelists answer this thing. And I went last. I don't think I was supposed to go last because they were just coming down through the table. And I said, I'll hold mine. And I said, I can see, I understand how it's easy to see how this came out of nowhere, right? Because, I've been promising people in this area since I moved in that gangs were coming, and, there were all these crimes that were going on in the area, and nobody wanted to believe me. And I said, one day you'll wake up and you'll think it just came out of nowhere, but it didn't, right? I can see how easy it would be because of focus, right? But I grew up in the inner city, and we've always had this stuff, right? My parents moved us out of that area just across the river to a small town and whatnot the year I was supposed to go to a brand new middle school that was just hyped up to be the greatest thing since Swiss cheese. And that first year, this is middle school. Not only was there gang violence and drugs, but 6 kids got killed that year in school, right? I speak not so kindly about my stepdad over the years, but that was one of the, whether it was luck or whatever, right? That was, he got that one right, right? But what I said was, these things have been going on as long as I've been alive. I think what's different and what's at the root of the question is it didn't happen in a small town with white kids. And so what really stands out to everybody is that got the press, right? And so now it's on everybody's mind. Now there's fear because it can happen to me where I am. And the room was silent. They eventually just wrapped it up because nobody had any questions after that. But that's what it came down to. And that's what happens when people make these snap-ass decisions or judgment calls or whatever. It's because they're projecting. It's in psychology, it's called transference. They're transferring their experience and their belief and their exposure to things, right, globally. Okay. And I've heard old folks in this little small area where I live, why do you travel? Well, I want to see the world. I mean, there's a huge world out there, and I never left this area, right? Lived in this 13-mile radius kind of thing here. You've seen one part of the world, you've seen it all. And I said, that is always spoken by people who have never gotten out and seen anything, right? So anyway, on one side, be careful that you don't succumb to the same kind of belief system or the same kind of thinking. On the other side, right, you're always going to have haters and naysayers and whatnot. And a lot of the naysayers, they came out of the 80s when they petitioned the U.S. government to make ninjutsu illegal because, according to them, we were stealing all their students. As a matter of fact, some of them, here's how quickly they thought on their feet. They were wearing white uniforms yesterday. Today, they're wearing black uniforms, and they hung up a sign in the window, took down the Taekwondo sign or whatever it was, and hung up ninjutsu, and kept doing the same thing. Well, that worked for a little while. Anyway, what else? What else do we have, James? Before I jump into the 5 phases.
Victor said you will see me in spring 26.
Awesome. I'm hoping in 26 I can get another one of our Japan training trips going, because my training trips are not just like we're going to go post up in a guest house and then just go to the classes that are going on. We take day trips, and there's at least one overnight. There's one overnight because of distance. So we can go to historically relevant places to these lineages, see that stuff, and it's all still training, right? So, matter of fact, one of the places I take people, they will stand on a plot of ground on top of a mountain where a dojo used to stand, where Daisuke Nishina, how do I say this? Because his grandson formalized the system, but he backdated everything to dad and grandpa as first and second Soke. So where Daisuke Nishina, the one we all know as Daisuke Togakure, founder of Togakure Ryu, trained when they were a student just like us. Some people think it's cool. Most people think it's cool. Some people are just fucking tired because I made them climb a mountain. When's that last bus come that's going to get us off this mountain? Anyway, cool. All right. Anything else?
That's it for now.
Okay, cool. All right. Let's jump into part 2. So let's take a look at the 5 phases of effective self-defense strategy. So please don't confuse this with the 8 phases of self-defense. So that one is an escalation kind of thing, from general awareness to situational awareness to escaping to safety. We've got 2 de-escalation phases, distraction and dissuasion. And then phase 6 is physically handling the situation. If you could not de-escalate, if you could not distract, if you could not escape, that kind of thing. And then there's 2 post-incident things where we're dealing with post-trauma and dealing with either the legal system or the powers that be, because often people don't think about what your employer or your fellow workers might think when they find out that, you just didn't defend yourself and protect somebody else, but, you actually injured another human being. It's amazing how many people that felt comfortable with you knowing, we're safe because Jeff's around. And then when it happens, I don't feel safe around you because, but you knew that I do this. Yeah, but I didn't really fully think through what that meant. Okay. Anyway, it's not that, right? So what we're looking at, the five, what we affectionately call the 5 Ds, or these 5 phases, is actually a framework that fits inside of phase 6. For those of you who have both frameworks, fits inside of phase 6. So we don't just have these 8 phases. We give people that in mod 1, 8 phases of effective self-defense strategy on an escalation scale. Each one of these things is an area of study and training. They all have skill sets. They all have techniques. They all have things that you learn to do within that to end the situation there, right? So within phase 6, physical defense, this is one of the frameworks. This is the primary framework that's in there, right? So what this is understanding that any attack or violent situation goes through 5 phases, or is led through 5 phases. All experts, all masters and whatnot use this thing, right? I'm not saying that they're using the 5 phases, but they do this. Okay. They intuitively know what phase they're in. So they know what to look for, what techniques or skills, whether they're verbal or physical or manipulative, influence, they know what to do. So they're always in the right place at the right time. Okay. The big thing here is that they can feel it, right? If they're teaching it, if they know they're doing it. A lot of people don't really know that they're doing it. They just intuitively do this thing, right? But those who teach it may call it something else. They may have 6 elements to it. There may be 8, there may be 3, whatever. Okay. There's OODA loops and all kinds of things that people have to help you make sense out of the chaos, which is really what it's all about. Okay. So do you have to use this one? No, it's the one we use because I want my students to be able to do more than just throw fist and feet and try this lock or whatever. Okay. It's the stuff that, 1, the kata are built from. 2, it's the logic, right? It's the strategic thing. It comes out of strategic thinking, right? Remember, the past masters pass more stuff down than just what's written in the Densho, right? Remember, don't forget, there's the Makimono, there's the Kuden that's been passed from generation to generation. Each Soke or Grandmaster adding his experience, his insights, because remember, again, the era changes, armor changes, fighting tactics change, and all that, right? Kosei didn't always look like this. Okay? Kosei started out looking more like one of these, almost more like a Bobi no Kamae, or kind of a modified Seigan, like a Shoshin no Kamae. Things adapt because armor changed, all kinds of things, right? So, but if we're going to get to that level, that is a goal for most of us. For some, right, it's this fantasy kind of thing, right? Kind of goes hand in hand with, once I learn it, I'll be invincible. Okay. I wish you well, right? Only a ninja can kill a ninja. Yeah, only in the movies. Okay, because in the real world, no. All right. So when I go through this, there are these 5 phases, right? Again, I'm going to reiterate, but I can't repeat this enough, so I won't. These are not steps. Okay. Once you know them, you'll be able to look at any kata and go through and know what moves go with what phase. Okay. This is also, it's not linear, But what I mean by not linear is on the creative that I put up. As a matter of fact, let me pop this thing up again, right? Okay. So there are these little arrow tabs here. They look like something that belongs on a notebook, right? There are 5 of these things, okay? And they're a different color, right? So it is linear, but remember they're connected this way, okay? And so what I mean by this, and this is where I need to reiterate that it's not steps, okay? You don't move step 1, step 2, step 3, that kind of thing, right? Fights and attacks are way too dynamic. Wrong one. There we go. Okay. So we need to understand that we could think that or do something to move things to the next stage, to the next phase. And he does something to counter that. We miss, we slip, whatever. And next thing you know, we're back. We've taken a step back. We didn't take a step back, but things didn't work out. And so we're either still in a particular phase or things have rolled back to a phase. Okay. So what I mean by that is if I just use I'll just use numbers for the moment and just say phase, right? So we could start out in phase 1. The attack is thrown, so we're automatically in phase 2, and then we could be going. I mean, he could throw things, and we're dealing with that. So it could be phase 1, phase 2, phase 2, phase 2, phase 3, phase 2, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, phase 5. Okay, it could work that way, right? So again, this is not for the people who just want to know where the hell to put their foot. They just want simplicity. They just want step by step, whatever. They just want to look good, right? Because anybody who, if you have never been in a real situation, and I don't mean like a 6-year-old slap fight or whatever, pushing and shoving your brothers around. If you have never been in a real bad situation, let me just clear something up. No matter how good you are, shit's messy. Okay. The literal stuff and being in that situation. Okay. You will not come out with not a mark on you. Okay. And that goes for internal and external. Okay. So I believe that the more that we can do to understand the problem, physical danger, and the more skill sets and options we have, more tools we have for dealing with that, the greater our chances of success. Do you need this stuff? No. Lots of people wing it. It works out okay. Lots of people wing it and they luck out because they end up being attacked or getting into fights with people who fight pretty much the same way they do. It all works out. But if you don't have it, you can't use it. Okay? We'll just leave it at that. All right. So my computer just made a weird noise here. James, am I still on? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. All right. Sorry. My computer made a weird noise. Okay. So let's jump in this. Let me just bring my notes up again. They're here somewhere. There they are. Okay. So let's look at these 5Ds. Okay. And again, the problem here is the moves only mindset versus a strategic self-defense mindset, right? You recognize that violence is random. We never know what it's going to look like, how the attack is going to come, anything like that, right? So the only people that have the comfort of sticking to a specific style or approach, you know, like wrestling, grappling, punching, kicking, whatever. Even MMA, right? You can't brandish a knife in the middle of a freaking MMA match. Okay. And if you can, I'll watch that. Okay. So the only ones who have the comfort of doing that are ones that are preparing for that type of fight scenario. And generally because they're already good in that arena. Okay. Again, but many martial artists focus too much, right, on things like memorizing moves and sequences. And they do that. And there's a certain level of pride to it, and there should be, because that's hard work, right? But they do it focused on the model, and that's a stepping stone to the next level, or to get a certain rank or whatever, right? Or it's just a model, right? Like, okay, this is just an example of, like, I could do this, this, and this to deal with that kind of an attack, okay? But there's still something missing, and that missing is the understanding of the underlying strategy behind them, like why those moves, right? What's the intent, right? I see kata as of like a conflict resolution thing, okay? Because 70% of our kata in the Bujinkan, regardless of the lineage it comes from, all start the same way. The kamai can be slightly different, but they all start with uke nagash. 1, 2, whatever, right? But it's what is done after and how the person ends up being taken down. If we could just focus on that part as a strategy, like, what if I need a person in this end position, not just where I won and could run away, or I knocked the guy down and he gave up, or whatever, right? What if I need him to land a certain way? What if I need to lock him up a certain way so I can get cuffs on him? I can restrain him till the cops show up, whatever, right? I can lock him up so I can search him and add to my own weapons collection. I'm just kidding. But you get the idea, right? So what if that's a whole different level of proficiency than just winning the fight? Okay. So what's underlying strategy? Okay. And again, this leads to strategic thinking over technique. Okay. So, again, just my opinion from my experience, both on the learning side and the street side, right, is the real problem with these moves only approaches is that they fail to address what happens when the fight doesn't follow the script. Right? There is no script. As a matter of fact, he's making shit up as he goes along. Okay. He may have started out with things, but based on what you do right now, he needs to address that and whatever. Okay. So there's this back and forth, give and take and whatnot. Right. So when the attack is unpredictable, right, then what? Right. Or when a weapon enters the situation, whether he had one and he drew it, or he grabbed a fucking hammer off a table, or whatever. Right. Now what? Okay. Manaka Sensei, he's the one that used to be Hatsumi Sensei's right-hand man in the Bujinkan, and now he heads up, and has for a couple of decades, the Jininkan organization. I have a quote from him that says, "It's not about how well you know the kata. It's about how you can feel the situation and know where to be at the right moment." And that's what the 5Ds, these 5 phases, are about, right? Knowing where you are in the fight, in the attack scenario, okay? Because that's what's going to tell you what to do, right? So again, real world threats are unpredictable, right? Techniques alone won't guarantee success, okay? So again, this comes down to strategic thinking. Strategic thinking allows you to assess where you are in the situation and choose the appropriate response, okay? And then the other side of this equation is, the people that are like, kata suck, man. You can never use a kata in a fight. That's bullshit, right? Everything's just too random. Of course, okay? But the mistake of random movement, just throwing shit, hoping that enough lands that you can win, right? This happens when people revert to just throwing shit, right? They're not thinking strategically, right? Other than like, I want to hit him, right? Or I want to wrestle him down. I want to get him, I want him to submit, whatever. Okay. But they're not thinking strategically about what phase of the fight they're in, what phase of the attack, where's the energy? Where's the, how much control do you have? Okay. And where is that control? Okay. Another quote from Tanamura Sensei, who heads up the Genbukan, right? To survive, it's not about simply using technique. It's about knowing the correct response to every situation. Okay. So the core concept behind the 5 phases of effective self-defense strategy is it's a framework, right, for strategic thinking. Okay. Each phase is designed to help the practitioner, you, me, whatever, right, know where you are in an attack and respond effectively in real time based on 1, what's going on, 2, where you're trying to lead it, right? It's not that we're not just throwing things, right? But what's the purpose of that thing? Okay. We would throw a whole lot less stuff if we weren't just doing what I call on the pistol range, spray and pray. If I just throw enough lead downrange, something will land. And we have a saying on the range too: can't miss often enough to win. Okay. And I can hit him, but some people are just freaking built a certain way, right? One of my teachers was fond of saying that if one of your strikes can't hit a 250-pound MMA fighter in the head and drop him, you need a lot more practice. What he was talking about was somebody who's used to getting hit in the head a whole lot, multiple times a week for fun. Okay. So you can hit somebody a lot and still lose. You can hit somebody more than they hit you and still lose. Okay. So 5 phases are discern, defend, disrupt, deliver, discern. Okay. Before we came up with these 5 Ds, the Marishikai Instructors Guild had 2 frameworks. We had one for strike defenses, handling somebody that was throwing, punches and kicks and shit like that at you. And we had one for grappling. Right. So that's how I'm going to break things down. Okay. And look at them that way. And then I want to step away from the back alley, the battlefield and whatnot, and look at it from the perspective of being in an argument or having some jackass just, screaming and ranting and raving at you and stuff like that. And using it's the same thing. It's the same principles, same concepts, same strategic control of the environment, of the situation. Okay. So phase 1, discern. Discern just means to pay attention. Okay. But to what? Okay. So, again, I'm very quickly, I'm going to go down this for striking, then I'll flip it, and then we'll do it that way. So in a strike situation, right, I'm looking at his posture, and I can be looking at clothing. I'm also paying attention to how I feel, environment, those kind of things. What can I use? Whatever. Okay. Now, again, we're assuming that we haven't been blindsided because we give students the framework from the perspective of him moving in. But if I've already been hit once or twice because I got blindsided or I wasn't paying attention, I fell into the freaking same jackass stuff that every other numbnuts in the world does because I'm just walking around scrolling on my phone, or I'm waiting for the wife while she's shopping. And so my head's down in this thing, and no matter what my belt level is, Joe Cool Jackwagon can get the jump on me. Well, you know what? First of all, that's on me. Okay. But 2, now I need to recover from something where I handicap myself and we got the jump on me. Well, how the hell do you do that? Okay. It's not like, you had a brief moment where you're like walking to the car and you thought, shit, what you want me to pick up? And then they got you then, right? Because your awareness shift. That's Banpen Fukyo. Okay. But for me to purposely out in public, take all my skills and go, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to need them. Let me just do this. That's on me. Okay. In that moment, I was an accomplice to my own ass kicking. Okay. You can think whatever about you want, but in the world of Daishian Miller's, Jeff's responsibility or whatever, that's on me. Okay. So, in an attack situation, right? Okay. So, what's my primary skill set in the discern phase? It's Kamai. Okay. It doesn't matter if I'm in Shizen or I take up Jumonji, whatever, because I'm picking up some cues and clues that this guy's moving in, and I realize, shit, right? We're already here. I can't de-escalate, whatever. Okay. So I'm going to do all this observation from Kamai. Which one? Whichever one I go to, the inner drivers are going to help with that and whatnot, right? Based on what I think the problem is, and based on what skill sets I think I have for dealing with this, now I'm going to start making decisions. Okay. So the question really is which kami have I practiced the most? Which kami have I ignored because I don't think I'm ever going to use them? Well, then now I can't. Okay. But discern. I'm going to discern from kami. Okay. And so that also starts to bleed into phase 2, which is defend, right? Because there's no hard, it's not steps, right? There's bleed over. So as soon as I take up kami, what am I doing, right? I'm limiting his choices. I'm limiting his options. I'm creating a problem for him. Okay. So this is the defend stage. What I'm doing at the defend stage, whether or not he's actually throwing something at me yet, right, is I am receiving and neutralizing the force of his attack. Okay. I'm using uke nagash, or I'm just using evasion, right? I'm causing him to miss. I'm causing his attacks to either not do anything, or I'm minimizing the effect they have on me. I want to ride them off so that they don't do to me what he intended for them to do to me. Okay. But make no mistake, this is not the defense that most people think of when they think of self-defense, where I'm putting whoop ass on him. Okay. At this phase, he's still leading. If this were a dance, he's leading the dance. Okay. And I'm going to let him. Okay. Now, this may take half a second. This may take a couple of seconds, given that the average time frame for the average attack, not sport fight, which often looks like the same in a street fight, it's 10 seconds or less. The average self-defense situation is over in between 2 to 10 seconds. Okay. Not multiple 2-minute, 5-minute rounds, whatever. Okay. So these are going to be microseconds, but he's still in charge, right? So if I don't have an opening, if he hasn't made a mistake and slipped or overshot it when he missed me or whatever, and there's nothing for me to exploit yet, okay, and he's throwing the next one, whatever, then I'm still in phase 2. I'm still avoiding, evading, I'm still neutralizing, I'm still counter striking. I'm trying to either create an opening, or I'm watching the effect of him missing or whatever, right? Do I have an opportunity yet? When that occurs, then the next thing I do, the next strike, the next thing I try to, it's still not the technique. What I'm doing is something that will either break his balance or increase the balance break or loss that occurred when he missed, which is why we always try to do last second evasion, right? So I want to disrupt. Okay. That's phase 3. I want to disrupt. Okay. That either causes him to lock up for a second, causes him to mentally hesitate, causes him to have to try to catch his balance because he's stumbling, or I've actually done something that's like driven him to a point where either way he's stuck. At phase 3, he cannot get at you the way he originally intended, the way he wants to, or whatever, because his body is busy doing something else, missing, fighting gravity, fighting inertia, trying to not fall down, those kind of things. When that happens, then I'm free to move into phase 4, which is take the fight to him. Now I'm going to execute my technique, right? I'm going to, whatever it is, right? I'm delivering that shito to the neck, whatever it is, right? The point of phase 4 is to knock him back or down, preferably down, right? To end things. But as soon as I do that, right? If this hasn't, even if it ends up in me having him in a restraint, a lock, something like that, right? I'm in phase 5. Phase 5 is discern again. It's a reassessment, right? Where am I? What's next? What was the effectiveness of the technique? If I just knocked him down and I don't have him locked up, right? Is he down and out? Is he running off? Or is he getting back up and coming back in for the next thing? In which case, if that's the case, then phase 5, discern, becomes phase 1 automatically for the next cycle. Okay. But again, it's not, it's sequential, as in it moves from the beginning of the engagement to a positive ending for me, for you, right? But it's not sequential, as in it's going to go discern, defend, disrupt, deliver, discern. It could go discern, defend, disrupt, but he stumbles away from you and resets. Shit, we're back in phase one, discern. Okay. And now next thing's coming, right? It could be discern, defend, disrupt, defend, disrupt, deliver, discern. Okay. The trick is, one, knowing what the conditions are in each phase. Two, how much control I have and what my ability to initiate will be, right? Because if we look at most fights, people will think they have an opening or whatever because their only plan is phase four, right? Ground and pound, hit him, land something, whatever. This is why people like hit each other at the same fucking time. Okay, because they're only focused on there's an opening and I'm gonna try to hit him. Okay, and then they run into the other guy's thing too. Okay, let me tell you something that a teacher told me a long time ago. In ninjutsu, mutual death is not an option. There are some classic martial arts styles that are out there that have kata. You do the solo kata and you die at the end because you're supposed to learn about humility. We're fucking ninja. No. Okay. Humility? Shit. We have kata in the Togakure school where it's a hit and run and you freaking scurry off and hide. Okay. No. Okay. Because if I stay in this, I'm going to die. And if I die, I can't protect those that I'm here to protect. So I'd rather run off today and whack your ass tomorrow than have you whack me today because some ego-driven kind of thing, let's just see what happens. Yeah, no. Okay. So anyway, so the fight, and of course, right, we all know that fights can go from punching and kicking to grappling or back or weapons, whatever, right? That's the nature of real self-defense, of real world stuff. It's survival. Anything goes. I'm just splitting these so that it's easier for us to get our head wrapped around, right? So very quickly, let's go back through them again, but we're going to do it from a grappling kind of scenario, okay? So again, in this one, discern begins with the grab actually happening. Okay. So when they grab, and this is something that I need my students, after they've learned a technique, I don't care if it's in mod 1, mod whatever, lapel grab, kumyuch, wrist grab, whatever. Once you've learned the technique and whatnot, now it's time to start looking at each of those elements within it. Okay. So when he grabs, what do I feel? I'm discerning. Okay. So I am in this iteration of it, discern is monitoring. Okay. I could even be using a monitoring hand, be touching him, whatever. But when he grabs, what's the force? Can I feel like any openings, that kind of thing, right? Sweaty. How much movement do I have? How limited am I, right? What does it look like he's going to be doing next, right? Is he grabbing me to haul off? Is he pulling me somewhere? Is he pushing me somewhere? That's where now that leads into phase 2, right? Defend. I'm going to neutralize the force of his attack. If he's pulling, I'm going to drift with it. If he's pushing, I'm going to drift with it, right? I need to keep my center plumb, as carpenters would say, right? I don't want to be catching up because if he pulls and I'm late, then I'm trying to catch up or I'm stumbling while he's jacking me in the skull. Same thing with pushing, okay? Because we have to understand, it doesn't matter how somebody grabs you. Bear hug, choke, lapel grab, kumyuch, whatever. There's only 3 basic things that somebody will do as a result of a grab, or there's 3 reasons why somebody would grab you, Okay. They're either going to pull you someplace, they're going to push you someplace, or they're going to hold you in place to do something else. Now, those three get mixed for different iterations within, the chaos, but those are the three basic things. Most people don't go beyond partner grabs, I do technique. Most people don't do that type of sparring or randori, where it's not just about whatever. It's not just about punching, kicking, whatever, but like I'm moving and whatnot, and he reaches out to grab something on me, and he's going to grab and push, grab and pull. In Shinden Fudo Ryu, there's a kata that's nothing but he grabs and pushes, or he grabs and pulls, and then there's a one-step response to neutralize that and to regain control. That's the extent of the kata. Right? So, and ironically or coincidentally, that kata's name is Shizen, natural. Okay? So anyway, right? So again, grabs, doing whatever, and I'm going to neutralize the force of. So when he grabs, right, the first part of it as he's coming in, right? When I said it begins with him grabbing, I didn't say he was already on you. I said he was grabbing. So I'm paying attention. It's coming in all the way up to feeling how things are wrapping, grabbing, whatever. He could be partially on and have some skin, whatever. Okay. But once it's, then the second half of that is it's being moved. And so if my arm's being pushed down, I want to make sure my knees and hips are dropping so that I don't get my head yanked forward and then he could punch me or grab me by the throat, right? If it's turning me, I want to drift with that, right? And the lead arm comes up and whatnot, right? So again, I'm still receiving and neutralizing the force of his attack. I'm maintaining my own balance and alignment and neutralizing the effect of what he's trying to do. Okay. This is all dynamic, right? It's force and energy. Okay. Then, right, even if we're doing a wrist grab escape or whatever, which is what people tend to focus on, right? But how do I do that in a way that even if he's bigger or stronger, he can't stop me? I have to disrupt him. Okay. So with a lot of these techniques, it doesn't look like we're breaking his balance physically or whatever, but we are. There's an interesting thing with the cross-side and mirror-side wrist grabs that we have in Mod 1. Okay. As he grabs and I neutralize that, while I'm neutralizing it, I flare my fingers, right? Really wide, like a cat breaking things out. Not just straight, but flare this way. I don't know if you can see this through the screen, right? Or through the camera, but when I do that, my wrist gets just a little bit thicker, okay? And a little bit narrower. That means the way he grabbed me based on the way I am, that changes. It moves his fingers ever so slightly apart. It changes the grip and allows for certain things to happen. So it doesn't have to be like he's going to fall down, right? I'm disrupting structure. I could be disrupting overall balance and ability to stand up straight, right? But disruption is also psychological. It's also emotional, those kind of things, right? So I might say something to him. I might, who knows? I might spit at it, whatever. But I want to throw him off. So I'm creating a divide and conquer kind of situation where this grabbing hand, wherever it happens to be, is now weaker than it was a second ago, a microsecond ago, right? And it allows me to get him off me. Or if I'm doing like a lapel grab kind of thing and I'm breaking that grip so it's off, right? Not just breaking the grip, I'm doing it in a way that moves him off the side of his foot, those kind of things. So we need to understand physiology more than just, I'm throwing my thing and he's doing his thing and whatever. Okay. And then when I have that, that's turning into the break or the escape and the follow-up, take the fight to him kind of thing, right? So in a grappling situation, this is typically where I am restraining him or taking him to the ground, pinning him, those kind of things. And then again, I'm discerning, right? Is he locked up? Is he still squirming? Do I need to shift? Do I need to adjust? Do I need to let go and back out? Whatever, right? So again, it's kamae or monitoring, depending on whether he's on you or not yet, right? Neutralizing, receiving and neutralizing the force of the attack, disrupting him physically, mentally, emotionally, structurally, whatever, okay? Take the fight to him, okay? Or take him down, lock him up, those kind of things, and then reassess. What's next, okay? Do I have him? Is somebody else coming? Whatever, okay? So that's on the fight side, physical fight side, the way most people think of this stuff. But this is not just for physical defense. I don't know where you live in the world, but in my world, like, people are attacking emotionally, mentally, pushy salesmen, all kinds of shit, way more often, daily, weekly, monthly, or whatever. I can't tell you last time somebody tried to take a poke at me. They threaten me a lot, right? Nutbags who, death threats online and whatever. But there's way more of a likelihood that, one of my kids is not going to be happy with me, or somebody expected something, or they were standing in line for too long. And for whatever reason, the thing I needed, because I was waiting in line too, and I get up to the teller and it's more than they expected, and then it's this thing, right? So how do I handle that? Okay. Well, it's the same thing. Okay. Discern. What's the situation? Why is this person angry? Why are they yelling at me? Right? What is their agenda? Okay. Now, the way I receive and neutralize that is going to depend on my relationship to them, what problems I may have tomorrow, whatever. Okay. How will certain answers be received? Okay. But when it's time to shut this down, I need to break their balance. I may need to get them to hesitate. I may just wait for a moment where they run out of steam and they need to take a breath to keep on going, right? And then I'm going to say something that will make this go away. They will either storm away from me, or it will give me that opportunity to move away from them, or who knows, it may be temporary, it may be permanent, right? But then I'm going to discern and, right, okay, are they going away to get allies and coming back, or they, that, oh shit, this is going to turn physical, that kind of thing, right? But let's do this. I'm going to use a physical technique to make the life skill, the life application, more applicable. Some of you may have already heard this example. It's just one of my favorite go-tos, because Ichimonji no Kata is an ideal, like, perfect model. It's not a fundamental because it's a basic. Doesn't mean basic. It means everything else is built on that. It's that fucking important. It's like a keystone in an arch. If you remove it, everything else collapses. Okay. So we'll use Ichimonji no Kata, right? So, because I'll often ask students later on in their training, right? What is that kata doing? Right? Why are you doing that move? Because it's in the kata. Okay. Well, if that's your only reason, there's the damn door. Go find something easier. Right? Why that move? Why that move now? What is it doing? What is it setting up? What is it taking away from him? That kind of thing. Okay. So let's use that. We understand Ichimonji no Kata. Okay. He throws an attack. I shift away and I do uke nagash. Right. And then I shift in, shito to the neck. And then I back out. Okay. I know we could do lots of other things. But what phases are we in? Okay. Well, he throws a put. No. As he's approaching and bringing his limbs up, how is he posturing? What does it look like he's throwing? Right. So from kamae, I'm establishing initial safe distance to force him to throw something that gives me more time and stretches him out to break his strength. Okay. So discern, paying attention to what he's doing. And then that rolls into phase 2, which is defend, right? So I'm already establishing a greater distance. I'm forcing him to attack from farther away, right? The punch comes in, that stretches him out. And then uke nagash, people would say uke nagash is phase 2, but uke nagash is phase 2 and 3, okay? Because as he throws the punch, I'm receiving it. Remember, I already made him have to punch from farther away. He can't get me with a jab. He can't get me with a lead kick. So he's forced to have to overextend himself. So I've already begun defend before we even come into contact with each other. And then as I receive, right, that's still part of 2. And as I rock back in to start delivering this arm is still controlling that arm. So that rolls into 3. Defend, disrupt. And I'm bringing this hand in a certain direction where it could be this way, it could be this way, where he thinks an elbow's coming or whatever. And so he's already starting to do things worried about this incoming thing. That's all part of disruption. Doesn't necessarily mean I have to do it. I can make him help. Okay. And then he can't stop me. Pop. Right. Yep. The shoot, though, is, well, there's other things going on with the lead arm or whatever, but we'll just call this what it is, right? So I'm tagging that, drive him into the ground, back out, and doing what? Watching him, looking around, checking to make sure he didn't have friends coming or whatever, but I'm watching. Down and out, getting up and running away, or getting up and coming back in, calling me names, drawing a weapon, whatever, okay? So we've gone through the 5 Ds, but what are we really doing? Okay. From a safe position, I'm not involving myself, right? So I'm paying attention. I am listening. They're barking, right? I'm listening to what they're doing. Okay. I am emotionally detaching. Okay. And I'm observing. I'm paying attention to what they're doing. So that's my defense. I'm receiving and neutralizing the force of their attack. Okay. What I'm also doing, because I'm discern runs through all of these. It's not just the beginning and end. You're always discerning. Okay. So I'm listening to what they're saying. Okay. Anything that they're right about, I'm going to not dismiss totally, because if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm going to set that aside because I can work on that later. Okay. What I'm listening for are things that they've embellished, right? They've made bigger than what it was, or they've lied about. They made it up. That's the weak points that I would see in a fight that could shut this thing down quickly. So I'm going to gather those, and then at that moment where they, right, or they ask me a question or whatever, I could just break into it and go, okay, whoa, my turn, right? And now, right, I am going to pick off the things that they embellished or lied about, and only those things. What most people do when they're trying to win an argument is they just either yell over each other or just keep slinging shit back and forth, dismissing things. No. I'm going to target those things where they either have to, they either have to acquiesce, they have to surrender, or they have to try to escape from, or they have to lie more and dig their hole deeper. Okay. That's the weak point. They're off balance, and now they have to, right? Now I'm in phase 4. Okay. And of course I'm assessing, right? So if they go off, they, whatever. Okay. And am I looking for divorce papers tomorrow? Whatever. Right. Okay. So now hopefully you're not a one and done and you're going to do things that will lead in that direction. But, sometimes you just need this to be done. Okay. But my attack could also be, oh yeah, bing, hit 1 or 2 and go, this conversation's over. And I extricate myself from the situation. Okay. Either way, right? The attack was done and I reassess from a distance, whatever. Okay. Or that rolls back to escape. Right. So again, these things overlap in the 8 phases, but hopefully you get this. Okay. Now, if a pushy salesman starts doing things and I go, not interested, Okay. And this has happened already. My wife is like, man, you need to lead because I'm just a sucker. I can't say no to these people. And I go, no, we're not interested. But don't, not interested. But please don't make me say this again. And I make dead eye contact. And then some smile, some like turn away quickly, or, some will know, oh, no, okay. Right. And then there's this knowing smile and they go on to the next target. Right. But I neutralized. Right. And now I'm balancing by going, said no once. Okay. And then my attack is don't make me say it again. Okay. All the while discerning. Okay. So that does end this part 2. Now, if you're interested in more than this, actually, I have the address here. James, maybe you can bring it up. There's some to go back to the, well, you know what? Let's do questions and answers first, because there's 2 free resources that we have on the website that tie directly into parts 1 and 2 for this. So let's do questions first, and then I'll pop those up, and then we'll call it a session, I guess. So what do we have, James? Questions, comments, complaints? Is James still on? Uh-oh. Oh, there he is. Okay.
I haven't seen anything new come in.
Okay. Let me ask things differently then. Was this helpful? And if so, how? So while we're at that, right, we have 2 resources for number 1, for part 1, where we were discussing the naysayers and how this stuff doesn't convert and all that kind of stuff, right? I made a worksheet for students quite a while ago. Yeah, James. So it's on onlineninjaacademy.com. This is I call it the Ninja Secret Training Framework, but it's the eight gates of Ninja, the Ninja no Hachimon. Okay. It converts them to modern days. Same categories, same things. Okay. Some of them stay exactly the same. Other ones, like the weapons, primarily, what that would look like if the ninja were making the 8 gates in today's world. But the principles and concepts stay exactly the same. Exactly the same. So it's a cheat sheet. And so on one side, well, let's say facing you, on the left side, there's the original 8 gates. Okay. The sword, the shuriken, the spear, that kind of stuff. Right. And then on the right side is the modern equivalent. And then in the middle, summarized, right, it's the principles and concepts. Okay. So you can find that at onlineninjaacademy.com/ninja-training-skills. So ninja training skills, dash in between each word, right? onlineninjaacademy.com/ninja-training-skills. Put in your name and email. You can have the thing. Okay. There's another one that speaks more to important insights or perspectives of surrounding training and what's missing from people's training, both internally and externally, that no matter how many techniques they know or how good they are in the dojo, could leave them not so well off in an actual situation. Okay. It's a report, ebook, whatever you want to call it, that again I wrote a long time ago. Okay. It's called The 3 Massive Mistakes. And then the subpart is even smart Bujinkan ninjutsu practitioners make that will keep you worried about surviving a real attack. I know, big, bold claim. Okay. Inside, I don't use a whole lot of Japanese, just in case you need that to make you warm and fuzzy. If you do, don't get it. Right. I actually use some linguistic, we'll call them tricks, that are they're going to sound, they might look a little cheesy, but they're there to help you remember them faster, easier, and to retain it longer. Okay. So again, 3 massive mistakes that you could be making in your ninja training or in any martial training. Okay. And these mistakes could drastically affect your ability to survive a real attack. Okay. This is not subjective. Like, I don't know you, I don't know your context. Okay. You may be doing all these things, right? But this lays it all out. Okay. And so it's at onlineninjaacademy.com/3, the number 3 massive mistakes. Okay. The book is called 3 Massive Mistakes. Okay. So onlineninjaacademy.com/3 massive mistakes. Okay. They're both free. Okay. You can get them and dive deeper into this because both of these are overlaid over whatever techniques, whatever training, okay? Because it's about the principles and concepts. It's about the strategic thinking that went behind how the kata were built by past masters and passed down, and those things that we need to make sense out of the things that everybody gets all warm and fuzzy about. Okay. So that's what I have. We'll send out some emails and stuff about upcoming seminars and fall camp and whatnot. But all right, James, last call. Questions, comments?
No, still nothing else.
All right. So either I put people to sleep and their head is on their keyboard, making a whole bunch of L's or dashes or H's or whatever. That'll run on for pages. Or I got them in deep thinking mode. Or I don't know. I got nothing else. Okay. Their head exploded. I don't know. All right. So is there anything I'm forgetting, James? Fall camp, October 17th, 18th, and 19th. Is that right? Yeah. That's already onlineninjaacademy.com/events. People are already getting all signed up for that. So that's cool. Syracuse, September 20th. I got to head right back right after the seminar is over because my wife and I leave out the next day for a vacation that starts the next day. So that'll be fun. All right. Nothing else.
Brandon Miller said he is not asleep.
Holy crap. My son. So I got my youngest on and I got my oldest on. Fantastic. All right. Well, that's nice to know. And since he's a couple hours behind me, or an hour or two behind me, time zone wise, that's good to know. All right. So again, James, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm always a help. Appreciate it a lot. So everybody else, hopefully I'll see you on Wednesday for Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday, where we're going to go into this much more deeply. We're going to break down some kata to see the phases, and then Friday coaching call, we're going to do some techniques and identify the phases. Right? So again, if we can see them in the kata, then we can understand what the move is all about. But we should also know each move or each phase has a goal. It's not about winning the fight. It's moving you to the next phase of control. It's about control. We're all control freaks. I'm giving you a way to take and have more control. That's what it's all about. Okay. The trick, though, is to learn it so that you can adapt it, or not adapt. You can adapt to any given situation, and then be able to feel where you are, where the fight is, and know what to do. Ultimately, isn't that the goal, right? Have our shit together so well that it doesn't matter what he throws at us, we can handle it. Okay. All right. That's it. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you again, James. I appreciate it. I'll talk to everybody again next time on KUDEN.
Get more of KUDEN Radio, subscribe through your favorite podcasting site, or join our clan of serious modern warriors at onlineninjaacademy.com.